SEC schedule. So just to give my friend Sheik equal time, and when you take over a group chat between two of you and you're having an argument, that wasn't what it was last night. It was just like, I don't understand where you're going here. I'm like sidebarring. I'm sure he's sidebarring. I'm like, hey, am I wrong here? Like, if I'm wrong, I'll say I'm wrong. And like my friends were like, no, I think you're right. Like, and then, we may not have been arguing about exactly the same thing, but it felt to me like Texas fan complains about SEC schedule. And I was like, well, when you guys started chanting SEC, this is what you get.
Yeah, this is how it goes.
This is how it goes. Like, I know that you've lived a life of where you got whatever you wanted whenever you wanted it, but the SEC doesn't work like that, and they're not going to kowtow to you. Mm-hmm. And Greg Sankey is also very aware of that. So I do think that when there comes to scheduling agendas, if there's a commissioner that will say, hey, we've got to nip this perception in the bud, Greg Sankey heard it for a year that now, he was in Texas's back pocket, and Greg Sankey doesn't believe that. Everyone else is in his back pocket. That's how he rules with an iron fist. And so Texas got a very, very tough schedule next year. Mm-hmm. And what I've always said about Texas is that they don't take the shortcuts that a lot of people take. Look, the week before the A&M game, they're playing Arkansas at home. Now they get to close with Arkansas arrival and A&M arrival back-to-back, which is tough. But both those games are at home, but they have to play at Georgia right before it. And so their schedule next year looks to be pretty tough. Now, the first game is at Ohio State to kick off the season, which is great. Texas is not afraid to schedule these games. They also know, like that. They're also not – you didn't hear anybody from Texas going, well, the schedule, blah, 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 like we shouldn't schedule hard non-conference games. I'm pretty sure there are people at Texas like, quit your bitching.
Yeah.
Like, stop.
And,
like,
they're in a spot where if they lose to Ohio State, they'll be okay.
Yeah. And the argument we had, he's like, well, even good teams lose games. I'm like, yeah, but so don't lose. Like, okay, you lose, you don't get in the playoff. Nobody's promised anything. And, like, nobody should be done. Like, what favors do you want to make sure that, your team that you think is one of the best gets in the playoffs? Alabama lost 3 games. They lost to 2 6-6 teams. Mm-hmm. Had those 3, had Alabama's losses not been, Vanderbilt and Oklahoma, had they been, say, Ole Miss and Georgia, say, they beat Georgia, but, had that been a loss and, they had 3 better losses, they're probably in this thing. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, you got this 24-3 to Oklahoma is why you're not in this thing. Yep. And because that was not, you can in no way say that was a flukish type game.
There's
you
no way
can make
around
the argument that Vanderbilt could have been because that wound up being close. That kind of a fluke. Second quarter got away. They didn't have enough time to come all the way back. They kicked a field goal in the first quarter and then gave up 24 unanswered points to the worst offense in the SEC. What am I missing here? So there wasn't a fluke game. So that's why they're not in it. Ole Miss lost to a 4-8 Kentucky team or 5-7, whatever they were, a non-bowl Kentucky team. South Carolina, had some bad losses early. They had some good ones late, but they had bad losses early. So, these things happen. Yeah. And plus their non-conference schedule wasn't that great, South Carolina, compared to other teams. And Alabama didn't have a good non-conference schedule to fall back on and say, hey, we went 4-0 in a tough non-conference. The toughest team they played in non-conference was 5-7 Wisconsin or 7-5 USF. So, and I could make the argument that USF would have beaten Wisconsin by 17 points. So Texas never really has to worry about that argument ever because they're very good at scheduling and they've understood for a very long time that if we're legitimately good, it does not matter who we play. We are going to win the game. That is something I wish that everybody would figure out. If you're legitimately good, you shouldn't really worry about it. Now, don't make a non-con basketball schedule.
Right. You don't have to schedule 3 of these, just one.
Yeah.
You can keep the group, big-time school, FCS school, and then Group of 5 school.
Yeah.
That works.
So their schedule is at Ohio State. Then they play 3 non-con games in a row at home, San Jose State, UTEP, and Sam Houston. Again, I'm not going to begrudge them any of those 3 because they're going to Ohio Stadium to start the year. Mm-hmm. The year after, they went to Michigan to start the year. Like, good luck to you. Keep doing that so that the other teams aren't like, we're afraid. Texas isn't afraid. I'm giving you and maybe I'm giving you a roadmap here because for the first time in my life, I want you to win a game in 2 weeks. I can't believe it. I told a friend of mine this morning who's a Longhorn, like, hey, I'm pulling for you.
That's where you're falling on this one? Okay.
Look, sometimes when you have to choose between 2 evils.
I mean, you got to make a decision. You're right.
Yeah, I'm going to use the same excuse I heard for a lot of people in the election. I'm going to use that one.
I just did the best I could. I just managed with what I had.
Yeah, exactly. At Florida, which could be tough or could not, we don't know. Mm-hmm. I think it's actually they're looking up. If here's the thing: Billy Napier won this year because Graham Mertz getting hurt allowed him to get out of his own way. Like that happened. Like, sorry about your leg or arm or whatever it was, Graham, but that needed to happen for Billy Napier not to get fired.
That opened the door for Langway.
I can tell you that Lagway, would have kept rotating quarterbacks and kept losing the games that they won, and would not have a 7-5 record had Graham Mertz been in there, because that was where it was headed. They just would have kept losing, and Lagway wouldn't have gotten any better because he would have had to sit out every other series. And then all of a sudden you put him in there every series, you're like, oh, he's getting better each time he takes a snap. Funny how that happens. If only you had 125 years of football to tell you that thing. So, right. But Florida, of course, Oklahoma right after that. So here's the tough part of their schedule. At Florida, Oklahoma in the neutral site, which is, who knows how that game's ever going to go. At Kentucky and at Mississippi State. Now, granted, those 2 aren't going to be maybe as hard as you would think, but it's still a month away from home on the road, essentially in the SEC.
Yep.
So,
yeah, it's a bear of a schedule, and some of those games don't look as intimidating on paper right now, but who knows what's going to happen in the next few weeks. And, to their credit, they managed this one well, but you've got a young QB, as talented as he is, and a lot of moving parts, and not a forgiving 4 or 5 game stretch where you can sort of ease yourself into it.
Yeah. Now, when you compare it to A&M's schedule, they go, UTSA, Utah State, home the first 2 weeks, at Notre Dame, off, Auburn at Kyle Field, Mississippi State at Kyle Field, Florida at Kyle Field. All 3 back-to-back. Mm-hmm. Then at Arkansas, at LSU, at Missouri. So they kind of have the same thing, and then at Texas to end the year. South Carolina comes to them. But, yeah, so, I guess it's slightly better. But,
yeah,
the only difference is you get, 1 less. So I don't think they're alone in this. Florida's schedule, again, next year. At LSU, at Miami, the Longhorns at home, at A&M, Georgia, at Ole Miss, Tennessee, and who knows what happens at Ben Hill Griffin at the end of the year with Florida State. We have no idea. I know this. Thomas Castellanos is going to be the quarterback. 18 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. That's the line I'm being fed until he does what he did against us the last 2 years. I will remain this way. I will not be excited. I will not be disappointed. I will be this. My emotions are shattered. I have no feelings anymore, and it's a good way to live.
Yeah. Just, why get your hopes up? Why get emotional about anything?
No, again, eventually I'll be dust. I learned it every Ash Wednesday. We come from dust into dust we shall return. It's kind of a hopeless Catholic way of looking at things, but,
there you go.
It's
it's your way.
We had to stand in line for a guy to rub dirt on our head and tell us that. And, in the Catholic Church's mind, that's supposed to lift you up and saying, listen, everything else in between is fine. You start one way, you start the other way. But when you're 9 years old and it's hey, one day you're going to be dust. You will die and nothing will Nothing can stop that. All right, have fun at recess.
Go play with your friends, bud.
Yeah. By the way, we're going to have ice cream at lunch today. But just know, everybody in this room, you young children, kindergarten especially, one day you'll die.
Meditate on that during
Could be tomorrow, could be 100 years from now. Don't know. But we just want to make sure you know that early here in Catholicism, that death waits for no man.
Yep.
Jared, you want to hear LSU schedule?
Let's hear it.
All right. At fake Death Valley to start the year. You excited about that one?
Could be, yeah.
Again, Garrett's emotions have been shattered as well.
I've been ruined this year.
Yeah. Garrett's emotions have been shattered. Steven's emotions have been shattered since 65-7.
Yeah.
And,
That was a brutal game to watch.
And the 12th team in the college football playoff is SMU.
Good for them.
By the way, Rhett Lashley did respond. I sent him a text. He responded to me. He said, thanks a lot. Really appreciate it. Tell Steven I love him. No.
Good for you, Paul. Yeah, you and Rhett just texting buddies. Good for y'all.
I sent one out. Look, I sent texts out to everybody I knew that was involved in the playoff.
Should.
And I got, just as congratulations, Rhett and Jeremiah Dickey were the first two. And they're the first two to respond. I'm still waiting on some. Maybe I won't get any back. But yeah. So at Clemson, then Louisiana Tech at home, which.
That better be a win.
Yeah. But I like that they're playing that game. It's cool to me.
I do. You got to play in-state games. I wish everybody would play in-state games like that.
Florida at home really early in the season, September 13th. Earliest that game has ever been.
Yeah, I like having them early. Hopefully Lagway will still be working out some kinks, and LSU's defense better be better.
Yeah. Southeastern, then at Ole Miss, off. South Carolina at home, at Vanderbilt, A&M at home, then off. At Bama, Arkansas at home, Western Kentucky. Man, that for a stash game before at Oklahoma to end the year, that's not the best stash game you can have.
I don't
in the
like
world.
that stash game.
Yeah.
This schedule, honestly, this
You
sounds
need
a
to
lot
flip
better.
that one in southeastern Louisiana there, buddy.
That sounds a lot more manageable than this year. This year's schedule sucked.
You know what? We're not going to get to the wheel, are we?
We need to get it.
We don't have a ton of time.
We don't have a ton of time. I wrecked the wheel. Here's the thing.
We can
push
roll
it to
it
next week.
Or we could do that, or I could just spin it. I could just run down the names, and you could go just quickly buy, sell.
Yeah, let's do
Okay,
that.
let's do that. No special effects.
Do you want me to run and get it, or just
No.
Okay.
Just do
Emory.
it from right there.
Emory, you want to run it over there?
Oh, yeah. Emery.
Run the wheel.
Garrett, is Nuss playing in the bowl game?
I don't know. He put the video out yesterday that he's coming back next year.
But it'll be like a patchwork offensive line.
But yes, here's the thing. If Emory Jones and Will Campbell are entering the draft, Garrett Dellinger's injury has essentially ruined the offensive line and put it in shambles since the A&M game. Why do you want to go back there behind them?
Yeah, that doesn't make a ton of sense.
And Baylor's going to bring it on defense. Like I wouldn't be surprised to see a lot of AJ Swan in that. But at the same time, I think Nuss will play. I don't necessarily like it, but hey, whatever.